Today, we'll tackle the challenges and triumphs of dealing with our trash. From a recycling revolution to rebuilding oyster reefs, we're getting innovative with waste. We only recycle about 22% of what's possible, but we can do better, and the solution is easy.
People are really frustrated and confused about recycling. So they absolutely love the theory of recycling, but when it comes to actually knowing what to do when you walk up to a bin, they're confused everywhere. And the root cause of that is the fact that even if in one community you have the same recycling rules, every bin that you walk up to, whether it's at the library, the street corner, your workplace, your children's school, maybe even your own household, every single label on the recycling bins and recycling carts look entirely different. So as a result of that, there's tons of different looking bins, different colors, placed in the wrong place, sometimes not next to a recycling or trash bin, not put together. And somebody everywhere is reinventing a label. So as a result of that, 320 million people in the US walk up to a bin, say, all right, I don't know what to do, I'm gonna hope for the best, and they throw in whatever they want to in the bin. And that's why recycling is in such a crisis and why it's collapsing right now. I started drawing on my own personal experience and realizing I think I'm that person that's confused at the bin. And as I was coming back from a client meeting in Chicago, I went up to a bin in Chicago O'Hare Airport, and I remember this vividly because this was the big aha moment. I had my newspaper and I had an orange juice bottle, and I walked up to the bin and I thought, this is it. I have no idea, should I put them both in there, one in there? It just said recycling, it wasn't clear. The contents of the recycling bin just look exactly like the contents of the trash bin. And this man walks up in front of me and he throws in a dirty diaper and he says, it's probably all going to the landfill anyway. And that was the big aha moment, thinking, I think this is an epidemic that nobody is talking about. And that was 9 years ago. I started doing some research on what is happening behind the bin. Is this garbage getting sorted out? Does it work? Are there elves? And what I found, and I became a little obsessed with it, but I realized there are no elves. The technology for sorting these things is not that great. I thought, well, this could be a very easy fix. Let's just introduce a standardized labeling system for recycling bins. And I like to use the analogy of standardized road signs. All of us go through driver's ed usually when we're 15 or 16. And in driver's ed, we learn all the indicators for how to drive properly and safely throughout the US. So even though speed limits might be different from one road to the next, we know exactly what to do because the way that that information is provided to us, it's all standard. So I started the nonprofit organization Recycle Across America to do really the same thing that we do for road safety, but apply that logic to recycling. If the general public is confused when they walk up to a recycling bin because of confusing labels everywhere, and if that's leading to millions of tons of garbage going into the recycling bin, which is crippling the economics of recycling and causing it to fail, why don't we just fix it with standardized labeling for recycling bins and give the public a chance to be able to recycle right wherever they are? Recycling gets contaminated because the general public is confused at the bin. So if the public's confused when they walk up to a bin, they either wish cycle, which means they hope that what's in their hand is recyclable and they throw it in there because they're not sure, or they're apathetic and skeptical and they throw anything in the bin. So that's how contamination has become the big problem that it's become. It really destroys the economics of the process of recycling. And it also prevents a lot of manufacturers who truly want these materials back. It prevents them from being able to rely on them. The cost is higher now than virgin commodities because you had to pull out millions of dirty diapers. No, no, no. No dirty diapers in the recycling bin. Some other things that people might make a mistake with is most often plastic cups and plastic lids are not recyclable. People are confused about plastic bags. Number one thing you can stop doing is do not put any plastic bags in your recycling bin. Don't even put your recyclables in a plastic bag and put it in the bin. Another myth, though, is that if I see a chasing arrow on packaging, it must be recyclable. It's not. Don't rely on the chasing arrow. It's clip art. It can be put on anything. It was never controlled. So people put it on styrofoam, they put it on shrink wrap, they put it on all sorts of things. So it doesn't always mean that it's recyclable. When in doubt, throw it out. If you're ever confused about what the material is and whether it's recyclable, err on the side of caution and put it in the trash bin. Recycle aluminum cans, all metal cans, all plastic bottles that have necks, all plastic jugs. Make sure you recycle all good office paper, newspaper, clean cardboard. There was a time where the recycling industry did not want caps on the bottles, but things have changed where they actually do now want the caps replaced on the bottles. The plastic bottle is generally a different type of plastic than the cap, so the cap plastic is actually very valuable, and in order to prevent jamming of equipment, they actually want the cap replaced. You know, just stick with the basics, and if we all do that, the world will change. Recycling has never really been measured as the greatest world-changing solution that it is, because it's been so crippled by dysfunction. Is recycling profitable right now? No. Could it be? Yes, easily, if we fix the public's experience of the bin with standardized labels. Is there a demand for the material? No, not right now, because it's highly contaminated and super expensive to process. But once we fix that problem with the consumer walking up to the bin, the demand will be set free so that these companies have access to the materials. There is absolutely nothing that remotely compares to the environmental and economic impact of recycling when the public is able to do it properly. It prevents waste from going in the oceans, it mitigates population growth, it reduces the amount of depletion of natural finite resources, it prevents deforestation, it reduces CO2, reduces use of fresh water. It's just a home run, and it is the only action that the public is doing unilaterally today. So we have to make it thrive, and we have a simple solution for that.
You recycle, right?
How do you handle millions of visitors and their trash? The city of Orlando is figuring it out.
Orlando is the most visited destination in the world. Last year, we had over 72 million visitors come to Central Florida. If you want to put that into context, the city has about 300,000 residents, and I would call our metro area about 2.5 million. So the visitors represent basically the population of Atlanta visiting the city or Central Florida every single day of the year.
We have a lot of strain on our resources. When people come on a trip, they're certainly not thinking about being more environmentally friendly, right? You're pumping the AC down as cold as possible, you're taking longer showers, you're producing about a ton of waste per person, and then you get to go home. And we as the city have to figure out how do we sustain the economic growth of our city when we're dealing with these types of challenges.
Since the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Accord, it's really fallen to local governments and cities to be the leader on climate change and all things green. And then there's a little bit of a competition, not just in the aspect of it's the right thing to do, but also we're competing for young, smart kids that are going to make our cities the successful cities in the future. And that's one of the things that they look for, is whether you're a city that cares about the things that they care about. So whether it's mass transit, whether it's recycling, whether it's green energy, those are things that are important to this generation of smart kids.
Our program and platform is very comprehensive. It looks at everything from green building development to clean energy, local food systems, solid waste and recycling, water, transportation. And so coming into this, it was obviously a daunting challenge just to get your hands around the beast.
Our goal is to be a zero-waste city, and that means that you have a circular stream and you're pretty much reusing in some way everything that is out there that could be waste.
How are we actually going to get to a zero-waste society? In terms of waste and recycling, there's a couple of different things that are barriers. One is, do we have the proper infrastructure in order to handle more recyclables and really truly divert all of our waste away from the landfill? In addition, the confusion that people have in the community about what can and cannot be recycled is another big barrier. So the need for education and standardization of how we communicate is a big deal.
Through a corporate donor, we ended up installing the standardized labels on all of the bins at Orlando K-12 schools. And in the first year, their recycling levels increased 90%. And the school district saved $370,000 in trash hauling fees, net savings in the first year.
In the 2017-2018 school year, the school district recycled 60% of our total waste stream. We saved $1.3 million through our recycling program because it is cheaper to recycle than to send it to the landfill. Our hope is that students take lifelong sustainability habits home. They can talk about what they've learned in the schools with their families and with the communities.
With the standardized labels, we're having the ability to not only take that passion of the youth that really cares about the environment, cares about recycling, but helping them become better recyclers in their school district from one grade to the next and one building to the next.
We actually do some stuff where we go door to door, and especially if we're getting recycling that is mixed, that has contaminants in it, we'll actually go back and talk to a resident and talk to them about how to recycle properly.
The more manufacturers demanding recyclable materials, the more there's going to be an economic and value for recyclables, and then there's going to be an interest for us to push more recycling in the community at the end of the day.
Another thing we do is we have backyard composting. So we have a big bin that the city delivers for free, and we kicked it off on Valentine's Day one year and had a little advertising campaign that said, "Get dirty with your loved one" for the composting. I do that, and it makes me feel really good to take the leftover food waste out to the backyard composter, and you get a little therapy, I think, when you're out there putting your earthworms in or you're mixing it up, then using the compost for soil for the plants around your house.
And we started out with about 2,500 composters, and those were literally within the first month immediately signed up for, which was amazing. We saw that there was a demand there. We now have delivered 6,700 composters throughout the city of Orlando.
So it's been about 3 years since we started the commercial food waste, and we had been so successful on the residential side, but we knew how much food waste there was, so much more in the commercial side of things.
I personally often say that there's probably 20,000 different restaurants and potential commercial customers in Orlando or Central Florida, right? You're talking orders of magnitude. So if we can truly scale that up, market the program, get the word out. We actually just hired a coordinator who's helping to build customer acquisition and go out to restaurants and get them on board. IKEA is fascinating. The company culture around IKEA very much embraces sustainability. They are nearly 100% recycling almost everything through this store. They have a cardboard baler, they're recycling all of their plastic bottles and cans, and then they now have this food waste program that they participate with the City of Orlando, where they take all of their commercial food waste pre and post consumer, and we take that to the biogas plant. And it's primarily because we have a commercial food waste collection program that they can tap into. Most cities don't have the ability for these businesses to divert their food waste.
Every day we have a lot of customers who come here and eat. So the customer, they go over here, they leave the tray with their food and whatever they have leftovers here. And then we have co-workers who take these rackings. I will just take this tray with me, but they take everything to the dish room. So what happens when we come here is that we have co-workers who will take the tray and they will sort. We never waste any food. So what happens is all the food waste go into this bin, and this bin is where City of Orlando comes 3 times per week and they pick it up, and all the food waste that is coming from our customers is actually becoming fertilizers.
Our food waste collection program takes all of this organic waste to this anaerobic digester, this biogas facility that takes all that food waste and it makes biogas, and that biogas is turned into a turbine and it makes electricity for the utility grid, and then the excess is turned into fertilizer. So it's a really interesting and neat way for us to fully repurpose what normally was just being thrown into the landfill. There's a lot of cases in which sustainability and embracing it truly provides the triple bottom line approach, right? People, planet, and prosperity. It's not just about saving the environment. It is very much about workforce development, economic development, social inclusion, and making sure that we're protecting natural resources now and into the future.
I can give you a variety of reasons why what we've been talking about is important. So the climate change issue and leaving the earth better for our grandchildren going forward is certainly one of the big ones. But I'm going to concede that one of ours is our economic development strategy, and having a city that is known for being green and resilient is important in attracting the young talent here, just like having a performing arts center or having professional sports or a vibrant downtown. We believe that being a green city is just as important a factor as those are.
The Gulf is our seafood basket. When the oyster population became threatened, one group came up with a clever solution.
Louisiana is in a major land loss crisis. We have lost an area the size of the state of Delaware since around the beginning of the century, and we stand to lose nearly double that into the future without any further action. Without the coast, Louisiana is not itself. Louisiana's economy depends on the seafood industry. We supply, for example, 1/3 of the nation's oysters. Oysters are a big part of Louisiana's culture and economy. And over the years, the production of oysters has changed, and their popularity has grown very recently with a lot of restaurants. What has happened though is that the connection between the fishermen and the consumers has been lost. So traditionally, oyster shell might be returned directly to the oyster fishermen through the shuckers. Fishermen would then bring that shell back to their own leases, their own areas of water where they cultivate the oysters. So just by adding in dried and cured shell back to the water, they would provide habitat for new oysters to grow, and then they could harvest them again. But now with so many new restaurants and venues and endpoints for the oysters, those shells were ending up in landfills. When you think of what goes in a landfill, you think of trash, but oyster shells are much more valuable than that. The value in them is that they're composed of calcium carbonate that's in a really unique structure. And that structure is really attractive to baby oysters, when they need a place to settle on and grow. Oyster reefs are sometimes termed ecosystem engineers. They are filtering water, they are providing habitat for reef fish, they're providing food for fish, for crabs, habitat for birds even. The Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana saw this as an opportunity to raise awareness about coastal land loss and to actually do something good for the coast with these shells. We not only commit to returning all of the shells to Louisiana's coastal waters, but we use them to restore oyster reefs that protect our eroding shorelines. We could think about the cycle of an oyster. So they are harvested by fishermen, and then they are sold to restaurants who serve them to patrons. So the restaurants who work with us agree to separate the shells from the rest of their trash, and they place them into a bin. So we have these bright purple 35-gallon bins, and then we work out a collection schedule with the restaurants. Typically, we pick up shell 5 days a week. We contract a recycling company to run the collection for us. And they currently go around to 18 different restaurants in the greater New Orleans area. Once the shell arrives at the collection site, it is piled up. Now at this point, we get the community involved. They help us put the shell into bags, and these bags are like a nylon mesh, like a diamond mesh, and it's aquaculture grade, so it won't break down or cause any issues in the environment. Those shells are stacked up. And then the last phase is deployment, the installation of an actual living shoreline oyster reef into the water. Our first reef was installed in November of 2016, and it's in an area called Lake Athanasio of Biloxi Marsh. This reef was a half a mile long, and it consisted of 868 tons of oyster shell. A year later, we did some monitoring work, and we found that oysters have indeed been recruiting onto the reef. We have some growing out close to market size even now. And we also have found that the reef is indeed slowing erosion. The reef acts like a wave break, and it'll slow down that wave energy before it hits the shoreline, and that allows sediment behind the reef to accumulate where it once was eroding. With rising sea levels and other changes, Louisiana is just the first example of this sort of drastic coastal land loss. So we all need to really pay attention and focus on solutions right now, because this is only going to be happening more in other coastal areas. And we hope that projects like these, recycling and showing an example for how you can take a really simple idea and execute it well, will inspire more ideas like this across the coast.
In Clarkston, Georgia, another unique recycling program saves elegant fabrics from landfills.
You can imagine in this square mile village of Clarkston, there's 60 plus nations and hundreds of dialects. I was invited down to Clarkston to be a part of a group that was doing a mock American classroom for refugee children. And the women were just standing around, all the moms. They couldn't speak English and they didn't really know what was going on. A couple of days later, I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, sewing, maybe they'd want to sew. A designer connected to ADAC, which is the Atlanta Decorative Arts Center, called me and said, would you like to go into a place where there's lots of fabric if you need some fabric? Of course I needed fabric. And we drove to the ADAC in Buckhead and walked in and our eyes were as big as Georgia. So we walked out that day with 5 shopping bags full of fabric. So when a woman comes in and she finds out about Piece of Thread and the opportunity for a job, we actually get her right at a machine and put her down, and she has to do a little bit of a test, we call it, and then we raise $1,000 for every single woman, and that $1,000 gets her trained by the refugee that started with me that's now an American citizen. Najah was one of my first people that I met.
I like to help women. Even I push them to learn language, to learn how to drive. I push them to communicate with people. Live the new life. Support your husband. Support your kids. Support yourself. Be independent. Give something to another people.
So the fabrics, when I say like they're the best, the average cost of our fabric is $200 a yard, and it goes up and over 1,000. So we have silks from India, tapestries from Korea. This is from Italy, the origin, and this is $484 a yard. You wonder, what in the world? $484 a yard from Italy. It's beautiful. This kind of like a gold mine of fabric that was being thrown away, we heard, every day into our garbage in our landfills. Oh, and every single bag has 2 pieces. The inventory sheet that the lady fills out. It's a key fob set. The name of the artisan threader is Basira. And inside of our piece of thread card is Basira is from Afghanistan. She and her husband are expecting their first child. Because of her husband's job with the U.S. military, they were forced to flee. Every bag has a story, and piece of thread is a story. But I believe that selling the bag is going to become more beautiful from people like you and me by telling the story of piece of thread and then telling the story of the women that don't have a voice yet.